Today I will be talking about my fears for this pregnancy, my labor, as well as my postpartum period. As some of you know, if you've been following me long enough, I did have a very rough pregnancy, a very rough labor and delivery, and a very rough postpartum period with my son, my first son. So I just kind of have been thinking about like if this time around is going to be similar or all that, and I do have fears about the whole process this time around. So I thought I'd share them with you guys and just let you know what's on my mind. So to start, my fears for this pregnancy aren't really that many. The one thing is that I do fear that now that I have another child to pick up all the time and who is very large and heavy and all that kind of stuff, I feel like I might be hurting the baby or damaging my own body by constantly picking him up to put him in his crib or in his high chair, in the car seat, all that kind of stuff. He is very heavy, and I do feel when I pick him up and put him down and stuff that I get pains in my stomach, and that kind of does stress me out. I'm not sure if it's hurting the baby, or I'm sure I'm not the only mother out there with another child that they have to pick up, obviously, but I do stress that I am hurting the baby in some way, and that does make me a little bit frustrated. That's actually, I think, the only fear I have for this pregnancy. I do have quite a bit of fears for my labor and delivery. The first being that this baby is going to be really large like John was, and that it will get stuck, or that I'll need a C-section or something because the baby is so big. I know what they say, that usually your second child is smaller, but I'm still have that fear in the back of my mind, and I'm just really nervous because John was stuck for 2 hours. I couldn't get him out. I had to use a vacuum and all that to get him out eventually. So it just is really nerve-wracking thinking about that, and thinking that this baby, whether it's a girl or boy, could be big, and I'm really hoping they're not. So that's one of my biggest fears. Another fear that I have for this pregnancy, for this labor and delivery, is that I'm going to have to get induced again. It was not fun at all for those of you who've had to get induced. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about when I say you have absolutely no break between contractions. It goes to the peak and then instantly it starts again. You're at the next peak. There's no time to rest. There's no time to even breathe. It's super painful. And I was 5 hours straight, high intensity pain, and I could never wish it on anyone. It was the most painful thing I've ever had to experience, and I'm sure, like I said, if you guys have been through it, it's not fun, and I'm really stressed and nervous that I will have to go through that again. I don't want to be induced again. I want to just have a normal, natural birth. And with that induction fear is also a fear of having to have the IV in me again. Because I was getting induced, and I also had to get antibiotics, and I also had morphine at the end, near the end of my delivery. They gave me an IV. And because I had the IV, I couldn't move. I felt like I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't, crouch over if I was, cramping or anything. It was just so limited, my movements. And that's not fun when you're having, serious pains, and I had back labor. So having to, just stay in one position was so brutal. And yeah, I really don't want to have to go through that again. So I'm hoping I don't have to get induced, because then that will eliminate the IV, and then hopefully I will have some more freedom. Also, because of the induction and the IV, they had to put the monitors on my stomach with my first son, and because of that I also couldn't move as well, so that kind of sucks. So yeah, one of my other fears is just having to be induced. I really don't want that at all. Excuse me. That pretty much are the only fears for this pregnancy, for this labor and delivery. But the biggest fear, I have to say, overall that I have is breastfeeding issues. Yeah, my biggest fear is definitely breastfeeding issues. With John, you guys know that he, right in the hospital, he was a good nurser, I have to say. Right in the beginning, we're kind of give you a little bit of backstory, so you understand where I'm coming from with this fear. As soon as we put him onto the breast, I think it was an hour or two after I gave birth, we put him onto the breast, and instantly his mouth was wide open, and he just was whoa. He was so happy to nurse. He was starving, and he has such a powerful suck. I could feel the tugging. He was so powerful. And I asked for a lactation consultant there, and there wasn't one available. But then one of the nurses says that she was trained, and that she would help me, make sure he's latched properly. And she said that he was. She's all you have to do is, if his mouth's open, just stick him on the breast, which is what I did. I've never done it before. I had no idea. And I nursed him like that for a couple times. I switched, left to right and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I gave him both during one feeding. Things were going great until about the night of day 2, when I started scabbing and getting so sore to the point where I was bleeding, and like I would be expressing milk and it would be more blood than milk. And it was getting really, really, really bad and super painful. Like I would be crying, like bawling my eyes out and like gripping my husband's hand so tight every time my son would nurse. And I didn't know that it wasn't supposed to hurt at the time, so I never really said anything to the nurses. I told them it hurt, and they were like, "Oh, that's okay, like whatever." They didn't really like tell me that's not supposed to happen, so I had no clue. I thought that's just what happens because I've never used the breast before, and apparently now I know that it's not supposed to hurt and that he was latching on wrong. But because of that bad latch, things kind of went spiraling out of control from there on. He had such a bad latch, and it was so painful to nurse that I couldn't get him to latch on properly. And then with all the postpartum problems that I had, I ended up having to give him a bottle because I was in the hospital. I went back to the hospital for a few days. I had to give him a bottle. And I was pumping, and then the bottle caused nipple confusion. And then after he had the bottle, I tried to put him back on the breast, and he didn't want to nurse. He kept unlatching, and like all this stuff was just going on. And I didn't have, like, the nurse at the hospital never said anything to me. By the time I got a lactation consultant, like I paid for one myself, brought her to the house. When my mom brought her over, it was too late. Like, the problem was so far gone. He was so nipple confused and like everything that we couldn't fix it, and I ended up just having to pump and give him the bottle. So my biggest all-time fear is breastfeeding. And actually, with the breastfeeding issues that I had with John came my postpartum depression. I got depressed because he wasn't breastfeeding. So it really caused such an awful postpartum period, which I'll get into a little bit more in a minute. But I'm nervous that this baby is going to be a terrible nurser, or that I'm not going to breastfeeding. I'm not going to be successful with it. And I do have midwives this time around, so I know I'll have a lot more help. But I still have that fear in my mind that it's not going to go well, and I really do not want to have to lug a pump everywhere I go, in the car, to everywhere I go. It just wasn't fun. I still want to pump and store in my freezer, but I want breastfeeding to be how I feed my baby, and only give the baby a bottle when I'm, going on a date with my husband and leaving, my baby with my parents or someone. So I'm really hoping that it goes well this time around. That is my biggest fear. And my second biggest fear out of the entire pregnancy, labor, delivery, and postpartum period is postpartum depression. Because my son didn't nurse properly, I felt he was just constantly crying and starving, and I didn't understand why. And I was like, I would sit on the couch all day trying to nurse him, but because he kept unlatching and stuff, my milk supply dropped, so he wasn't getting much milk, which is why he was starving, and then therefore super cranky, nonstop crying. And it made me so depressed, thinking that I was failing and that I was not doing something right, and that I was, I was making my baby upset. Like, all these things were going through my mind, and because of it, and I also thought I had a colicky baby because I didn't know that he wasn't nursing. So all of this kind of stuff just kind of came together, wrapped itself in a big ball, and it just got thrown at me. And I just felt like everything was my fault. I was failing as a mom, and because of it, that's what caused the postpartum depression, and I was seriously depressed. It wasn't to the point where I hated my child or wanted to hurt him anyway. I loved him to bits, and I couldn't stop staring at him and stuff. But I just felt like my life is over, I'm failing, and I thought, like, at the time, like, formula was such a bad option, and I thought that, like, I could never give this to my child. Now I think completely different. I'm completely re-educated on everything, but at the time, that's what was going through my mind, and I just felt so depressed. And it lasted for a solid 2 weeks until I finally just gave up, gave him a bottle, and pumped. And then things went so well when I started exclusively pumping. He was fully fed, I finally got rest and everything, and things started looking up from there. Sorry, the SD card was full. But yeah, it was a very, very, very dark period for myself, thinking I was failing as a mother, wondering why everything was going wrong and why I was so unlucky, and seeing, how upset my son was, and knowing that I couldn't do anything about it, or at least thinking I couldn't. And then it was also a dark period for my husband, having to see me suffering so much, from pain, like postpartum pain, but also, seeing me so depressed and all that. It was just very rough on everyone. And I definitely don't want to have to go through that again, or put anyone through that again. It was not good. And because of the postpartum depression, which lasted for 2 weeks, and actually longer than that too, I really missed out on the newborn stage of my child. I was so depressed all the time that I only wanted him when he was hungry, and then I would say like, okay, you guys take care of him, I need to rest, I need to sleep. I felt like my life was over. I just, so many things were going through my mind, and I didn't get to focus on my son, and that really crushed me. And it's something I think about until today, constantly on my mind, thinking about like how I wish I could have spent more time with him as a brand new newborn baby, that I wish I could have snuggled with him more, done more skin to skin, which I did lots of. We did a lot of snuggling and all that. Like, he wasn't deprived from that, but he was my first, and I had no one else to look after except him. And I was just like, I wish I could have had more bonding time with him. And it really, like, it still bothers me till today. I can almost cry about it. Like, it is really sad, and I just don't want that happening again. So that's the second biggest fear, that and breastfeeding, which they tied in together. I know for sure if he was a good nurser, and he was a good nurser, he just didn't latch properly, and that was partly, I feel like, the nurse's fault, not teaching me how to latch him on correctly. And then by the time, like I said, we got lactation consultant, it was too late. But he was such an eager nurser, and I feel so bad that I deprived him of that, he wasn't able to nurse for me, and we have that bonding between him and I. I don't think it was his fault at all. Like, he was such a good baby, and I'm just really hoping that this baby's as eager to nurse as he was, and that now that I have midwives, I'll have more help with nursing, all that. That'll be super helpful. But yeah, there was just so much stuff that happened the first time around that I wish I could change. I know I can't now. My son's amazing and so sweet and loving, and I mean, I know he doesn't even remember that part of his life, but I do, and it does still bother me, and I really want to change it, this time around. So those were my biggest fears. I want to share them with you guys because not only does it help me to talk about it, but if there's any of you who have similar fears and think you're the only one, like, don't, because there's even so many more fears than what I've talked about in this video, but these were the main ones I wanted to share. But yeah, if any of you guys have been experiencing like the same similar fears, like any of you pregnant moms out there, comment below, let me know. Or if you ever just had a baby recently, or even like a year ago but had similar fears, let me know, and let me know how you guys coped with them and how you got over them. And I know it's just like a little hurdle in this thing and I just got to get over it, but it is really stressful when you think about how many things can go wrong, like, in your mind, and it's really stressful. So yeah, let me know, so at least I know I'm not the only one. But yeah, and if you're wondering what that is, it's just poison ivy. I know it looks a little creepy, but yeah, I got it from camping, so but yeah, anyways, that was just random. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you in my next one. Oh, and actually, one more point before I go. Hopefully you guys didn't leave this video yet. I won't be doing a postpartum update this week because nothing has changed since last week, except I did have my midwife appointment, and I talked to the midwives, and I am officially 15 and a half weeks. So I'm literally exactly 1 week less, or 1 week behind than I was. So I will be doing my, I think it's week 17 or week 18, week 17 postpartum update next week for you guys. And I'm going to skip the week 16 because I kind of did it already, and yeah, nothing has really changed since last week. So but yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye.